I will create a new controller of JS that is related to my users, to my user data, to my authentication logic. And in there, I'll first of all import my user model by requiring it from my models folder, the user file. Now, we need at least two actions here, and the first one is of course the action to sign a new user up. So I'll name this action sign up, and I'll get my request, my response, and that next function. And in here, I'll want to add all the logic I need to create a new user in the database. So for that, let's extract the email from request body email. Let's extract the name of the user from request body name. And let's extract the password from request body password. Now, obviously, to extract all of that, we need to know that it's there. So we should add validation. For this, I'll go to my auth routes again. And just as in feed.js, I will add this express validator check. So we'll copy that import from feed.js and add it to auth.js. And on sign up, I'll then add an array of validation-related middleware. I'll check my request body and there the email field, whether it is an email. We can also, just to bring this back into memory, define our own messages if we want to. Please enter a valid email. This would then be stored in the error object we can retrieve. We can also add our own custom validator here to check whether the email address already exists. For this, I'll import my user model, so require that from the models folder, and then custom, and you learned that in the validation module, by the way, in case you want to dive deeply into that again. The custom function, or the custom validator method here, takes a function as an argument which retrieves the value we're looking at, and then an object from which we can extract the request as a property with this destructuring syntax. And this function then should return true if validation succeeds, or return a promise if the validation actually uses some async task. So if the validation does something which takes a little longer, as in our case. So I will return user, find one, and I want to find one user where the email of that user, as stored in the database, matches the value of the email we're looking at. Now then, I have my user document here, so my user object as I found it in the database. And if that is set, and that's the only case I'm caring about, if that is set, then I will reject a promise. So I will return promise reject, and that will cause the validation to fail. All other scenarios will cause it to succeed. And there I'll return email address already exists. So that's just another validation we can add. Of course, I don't just want to validate the email though. So let's also validate another field in the request body. Before I do that though, just one step I forgot. I will normalize the email as well. But now I can look at other body fields like the password. The password can be trimmed and should then have, let's say, a length of at least 5 characters or whatever you want. And I'll add another check where I'll look into my body there to the name, trim it to remove excess white space, and this should now not be empty. With that, I got all my validation logic added. Now that I'm in here, I can also already import my controller. So my auth controller can be imported from controllers auth. And now I'll use that auth controller as the last middleware on my signup route and reach out to the signup action in there. Now validation was added. Now back in the auth controller, we want to collect any validation errors right at the start. And for that, I need to import something from the express validator package again. And that will be that validation result function, which I require from express validator /check. So this validation result function here. And I collect errors by calling that and passing the request to it. And now if not errors is empty. So if we got errors, then I know that something went wrong or that I will have errors. And in this case, I want to create a new error where I say validation failed, something like that. And I'll set a status code of 422. And I can also maybe pass some data, a new property I'll add, where I store my errors array like this. And then I can throw my error here. Didn't do that before, but this would allow me to keep my errors, which were retrieved by that validation package. I now just have to go to app.js, to my error handling function, and there retrieve the data from error, the data property, and also add this to the response I'm sending in case of an error. This is totally optional, but just to show how you could keep your original errors and pass them to the front end as well. So now I'm doing this, I'm doing that validation, throwing an error if it fails. If we make it past this if check, we know we have all that data we need. And now we can start storing the user in the database. Now, there are parts of the authentication module which still matter here. And one of them is that we should encrypt the password. So let's finish sign up in a secure way in the next lecture.